So here we are in front of compliance framework. This is a very important segment or even a chapter, if I have to say. The reason being is that it's a foundation, very foundation of the chapter. Why am I telling and stressing on this again is because, see, as a compliance managers of the company, we're required to actually do this, like do this in practical scenario, right? Given a point of time, if you go back and actually you have to understand, I guess there are various circumstances which will actually put you through in a place where you have to do this compliance framework. And that's one segment of it. So we'll go and understand what is this compliance framework. But before that, let me give you a small introduction. See, I believe you can remember any chapter or any subject by the way of creating stories, right? I'm not talking about the stories pertaining to, this is not about, hey, like a story of a historian or a story of like a small Sandamama or some, children's story I'm talking about. I say that everything you can connect in a story, the reason being that a story, normally scientifically, you can remember any stories in a format, and also a large chunk of information can be saved in your brains, especially you can remember a lot in your brain, just to make sure that if you've connected every topic of your chapter by the way of story. In this especially in this chapter, I'm just trying to show you how you can do this. If you find this particular tip or probably the kind of way how to study or like remember useful, start incorporating this in the other chapters as well, because this will help you guys in remembering a lot of things in a very compiled and a concise manner. So that's about it. So compliance framework, what do we understand? We are seeing in this picture, it's a very funky picture, right? What are we seeing here? We're seeing compliance resources, we're seeing culture, we're seeing policies and procedures, we're seeing training and communications, key compliance process, and compliance risk and assessment, review and monitoring. So many things, right? It's amazing. We're seeing so many different things. Yeah. This all of this forms part of compliance framework. I guess let's not wait time. It's amazing. Just go and we'll understand how it is for us as a company secretary, how important is this compliance framework as a company secretary, and also in an organization, how important role it plays, right? See what have I written? Compliance framework. Under that, I've written essential one on the corporate setting. Yes, it's definitely an essential one and a vital important thing which is in the corporate setting. The next one is the course outline, right? In this chapter, what are we going to talk about? Is something that I've mentioned and put it in the, like ideally kind of a way of easier way for you to know what is something that we will be learning in this chapter. The first thing is we are learning more about corporate compliance framework. So that's one of the things that we will be learning. Next, compliance chart. And the next one is compliance risk, which is also an inclusion of training and implementation. Next, the last being the compliance audit and its significance, how important is it? And then the other miscellaneous things. I've not really put anything in the miscellaneous except for one thing, but I want you guys to come up to me and tell me if I'm missing out on anything in this chapter. More happy to take that up, right? So that's about it. Let's go and deep dive and understand compliance, right? See, even before I want to go and understand the compliance framework, I want you guys to understand one simple concept here. And we are going to be studying so much about compliance obligations, requirements, importance, and everything. Don't you think that we need to know what is the real importance of a compliance and why is this even a compliance required in a corporate setting? Yes, here it is. I have specifically put out why is a compliance required, what are the benefits of following the right compliances, and what are the risks associated with it. This is like a broad category I've put up. I'm sure it's an exhaustive list and there are so many other things that you can be incorporating, but this is like a broad category again. So guys, what do you understand by compliance here? Any thoughts? Sorry, my bad. Any thoughts? Put it in the chat section. I'm just more happy. What do you think? Or even ask you, even unmute yourself and tell me what do you understand by compliance? Anyone? Guys, am I losing you? Hello. Hey, am I audible? Sorry, you can. I'm sorry, my bad. And I have I, do I have anything in the chats? Can you put out something in the chats if you want, like, what is compliance? What do you understand by compliance? Sorry, I'm not. Hey, let's make it a very interactive session, yeah? I really want this to be very interactive. Sorry, yeah, my bad. I'm just going overboard. Let me just see how I can. I guess I'm not able to see my chat. Okay. Ah, sorry, my bad. Following the prescribed. Okay, what is this? Adherence to the law and fulfillment of legal obligations. That's right. And following procedures, yes, following the prescribed laws and procedures, well, it's really nice, yeah. You guys have really already got it. What is compliance, and what is the importance and all of that. Okay. So maybe let me put that out in a simple way. I often believe that anything should be understood in a very simpler and an easier way. It's amazing that you guys have put up. Yes, it is the requirements and fulfilling to the obligations and law and provisions and everything. But compliance, in a simple term, if I have to tell to a normal person, compliance mean to say to comply to something, right? It can be anything. It can be laws, how you said, rules, regulations, and process, even policy, various other things. It's mean to say that I am going forward and complying to certain important segments. And that is what is the compliance mean. And why do we need this compliance, right? Like, why do we need it? What is the importance? Is something that I've mentioned in this particular slide. Why do we need it? Compliance is required because we have so much of multiple regulations and compliance associated compliance requirements to that regulations and rules in the industry. I'm sure because it's amazing that all of you guys are from a different part of India, and all of you are from different state. I'm sure a lot of compliances do change from state to state, right? Especially labor law compliances. A lot of labor laws are one few things which is applicable in Karnataka, which I'm currently staying here. I have been put out in Bangalore, but then there are so many other requirements which is even there, or regulation which exists in the other states. And that is what is important here, right? Because compliance are in such a place, or the rules and regulations in the current environment is so huge and broad that it is very much required for us to comply to it. And it's not like, the old school or like an old life where we just had like a couple of two, three things and we used to just comply. And for the sake of, complying, we were just doing it. It's not that way. The importance of compliance have grown so much that the penal provisions and the kind of imprisonment provisions are very higher. So that's what is the second point that I'm going to be discussing, which is the increased risk and liability, right? I'm sure you've, seen this particular section, section 447. It gives such a, huge penalty, like why is it giving such, bigger penalties? Is because for it is important, especially for it is important that to, make people get afraid, or make the companies get afraid of the fact that, hey, these are the compliance applicable to you and you need to be following all of this. And that is very important for you to comply. So this is what again and again they're trying to stress on. So because of an increased risk, if at all non-compliances are done, or the liabilities which will get applicable post non-compliances. Because of all this, the requirement of need to comply is very, very much necessary now in the current scenario. So that's about the need, right? Next is the benefits. What is the benefit? If I'm going to comply to certain rules, regulations, what for an organization or as an individual, what I'm going to be benefited is something which is for me, especially, forget about the whole world, right? You're complying, you're doing 100 things and all of that. That's a different thing. But what happens for especially as an individual is that we want to know, we want to understand, especially as an organization, not an individual, I'm sorry, as an organization, that if I'm complying to certain things in a better manner, I have a better control over my organization. That's very important. You've been seeing a lot, especially, I just have a small assignment to you. If you want to take it down, please take it down. Just find out, because of the non-compliances, how, I'm sure you'll get an ample amount of examples. But because of the non-compliances, how a company is losing a control over itself is something which is very important, right? I guess this is a recent example, if I have to give it to you, is the future group thing. Because there was so many bad debts involved, there's so many things which was not going really well in that company. The control inside the company was not great, and because of it, that's was one of the biggest reasons for them to actually go ahead and do or get a doomsday where someone has to come and actually help them to survive, right? So that is the importance, guys. Again, I'm stressing on a compliance for an organization is so important that it can have a better control of its own operations. That's one. Next, it definitely can avoid liabilities. Of course, if you're complying to everything, you're complying to all the rules and regulation. Why was it even required for you to, do not comply to certain things? So, of course, like, you're doing everything. People are not coming to you and saying that, hey, the liabilities, you have to pay some penalties, you're in prison, all of that will never come. Definitely, with the compliance, the liabilities will reduce drastically. Then, better brand image. Yeah? That's really important. I'm sure a lot of people, you must have even seen in the current environment, in the scenario, that the brand image is so important for every individual and even for an organization for that matter. Because of a simple brand, I guess you might have even heard of this new thing, new scandal going on in the Bollywood, right? Like it's about the drug abuse, how people are trolling Alia Bhatt, how people are trolling so many other people, and the brand image is actually reducing. And this is a real-time example for you. So of course, and because of that, probably they might have been even losing the endorsements which they were doing so far. So yes, even for an individual or for an organization, brand image is so important that it plays a crucial part. And if you're complying to everything, definitely compliance will help you to create a better brand image and tell to the people that, hey, I'm a pretty nice compliant company. And higher chances is that, especially if you're a startup, there's a higher chances for you to get a VC funding, right? Funding plays a very important role, which is an important segment that in this same paper that we're going to study about the due diligence, I'm going to talk about a lot of things here, like really a lot of things, especially about the due diligence, because I myself have worked on so many different projects that it's amazing. It's like an amazing area of practice. If you're really considering, please do consider that practice is because it gives you an ample amount of space and expansion for you to grow your knowledge, right? So that's about brand image. Okay. So what did we understand? We understood the need. Why is the compliance required? What are the benefits if you're going to comply to certain things? And what are the risks associated is something which is important. So what is that? Of course, as we have already understood in the previous points, because if you do not, if at all you're non-compliant with certain things, there will be a punitive actions or the imprisonments you're going to go and take up, right? Punitive actions being the penalties can go up from even a simple amount of like 500 to 1000 to like a maximum of like three amounts of whatever the kind of transaction amount value involved, or like crores together of money. So like it's like the kind of wide scope of this punishments, and especially the penalties are such huge that guys, you got to be really careful. And especially as a compliance officer, we need to be even more careful because we have an onus on us and a responsibility on us to be more compliant. Because do you guys know that we can be served notice? Have any of you have an idea? Oh, sorry, yeah, I'm just, I guess I've given an option to unmute. Okay, put it on the chat section. Yeah, you have any idea that you can be served notice? Sorry, man, this is really creating an issue. Yeah. Do you guys know, like, put it on the chat section. Do you guys know we can be served, especially as the company secretaries, can be served notice if at all a company is not doing right, or probably along with the MT, we can also be served notice. What is your thoughts? Guys, I'm waiting. Okay. Anyone wants to put up their thoughts? Cool, fine. I guess maybe I can take that up a little later and tell you, yes, Let me tell you again, as a company secretaries, we can be served notice along with the MD and the board of directors that we act, if people want to serve the notice to the company, they can serve the notice in the name of us, right? So that kind of provision is also there. And so for us, it's going to be really important that we need to buckle up and we need to understand how important is it for a company secretary, the onus on a company secretary that it is really required for us to comply. So that's about it. And extends to personal liability is the next point that I was going to, is that there are times when you don't follow certain things. It is really required for you guys to actually, like the personal liability, like if you've given, if especially directors give personal guarantee. So in that circumstances, a liability can also go to the extent that a director has to fulfill certain obligations, right? So that's the kind of an importance you need to be understanding, that why, if a compliance is not fulfilled, what are the risks associated to it. So this is like an introduction, guys. Like I'm again stressing on, it's an introduction what I gave you. Is that I wanted you to know how important is a compliance in the standpoint, especially of an organization, or in the standpoint of us as a company secretaries, what is the role or the kind of complexities that we need to deal with and we need to be aware of even before we understand the entire framework and also the compliance chart and various other things of the compliance framework. So that's about it. Maybe where the laws prescribes that a CS is liable. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There are laws actually which do prescribe, and normally also you can, especially in the circumstance like if you're an RBI regulated entity or if you're an entity of a real great importance, you can be served the notice. So in the name of you, you can be served the notice. So that's the thing about. Guys, I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen for a while, and you know I'll ask you to mute all, like not mute all. Sorry, my bad. Yeah. Okay. So you can unmute yourself and let me know what do you feel like. Are you trying to understand? Is it something other way, like if I have to stop or anything? Were you able to catch till now? Were you able to understand so far? You can put it out in the chat section. I can just understand. Is it okay? And I guess we lost some.
Yes, ma'am, we can able to understand, ma'am.
Okay. Am I going too fast?
No, ma'am, no, ma'am.
That's fine. Okay, fine. I guess we lost Mahesh Babu. Maybe he might join later. So how does it go? Oh yeah, sorry. This is my first class. No, I just want to understand if someone is dropping out, how does it go? Like, is it okay? Should we have to wait for them or we'll just go going? How is it?
Ma'am, we'll just go. They will join later,
They'll see
ma'am.
the recorded classes or is it? Okay, fine, good. Fine then I guess probably it's because of some internet connection because he was there for some time and I guess we lost him. That's okay. We're good to go. So any given point of time, again, I'm stressing on, please put out your thoughts in the chat section. It's more easy for me to understand. And unmute yourself, guys. Like, please tell me what are your thoughts. I really want to know because it's amazing for us to interact more. And I often believe that if you have interacted really well with the faculty or with the person, especially as a fellow student, you will remember the topics very well. So it's easier for them. You don't have to even recall. You just can remember just by remembering this conversation that we had. So any given point of time, please put out, tell me how is it going. I'll stop if I have to stop, and we'll go ahead from that. Cool. I'm again I'll start sharing my screen, and if there's anything, let me know. Yeah. Okay. So here we come on the. Sorry, guys. Just 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So the next slide that we're going to be talking about is the corporate compliance framework, which is an important one. So here we are starting with this actual, subject of us. So what do we understand by the corporate compliance framework? See, a structure. This is that structure which integrates the compliance record. Okay, he's waiting. Let me admit him. Okay. Hey, so the corporate compliance framework is that structure which integrates the compliance requirements of the company and puts forth the set of guidelines or the roadmap to achieve. So what do we understand by this? See, any organization for that matter, it would require a framework, right? It would require how a compliance has to be undertaken, what are the required compliances which is applicable for a company, and how to go about or a roadmap to fulfill that compliances. And if there's any risk associated with it, to mitigate or to reduce that risk is something which is this entire compliance framework is all about. So again, I'm stressing on if I have to give you an example. Let's say you have a company A, right, with you, and you are a company secretary who's appointed. And they say that, hey, this is, Manik, this is you, or this is, Ahuja, this is you. We are here, and we want you to create a compliance framework for us. So how to go about this is something which is important for you guys. So what at that time for a company A, we have to suggest is that I, as a company secretary, should know that how is that company, how is that company operating? What are the rules, regulations, laws, and various other things which is applicable? And how do I put out a roadmap or a guideline to that company so that they won't miss out on any compliances which is applicable to them, and they even will go ahead and reduce the compliances. So this is entire concept of compliance framework. So which means to say any structure which is giving out a details of what are the compliance requirements of the company and how to go about and have a roadmap in complying that compliances is something which is the framework which we're going to talk about. So that's the meaning of compliance or like a compliance framework. Next one is the three key components which is a part of corporate compliance framework. What are those? It's a compliance chart. It's next is compliance advisory, and sorry, okay, compliance. I'm so sorry. The L is not mentioned. I guess it might have been deleted out. Sorry for that. But yeah, it's a compliance scorecard, right? So these are the three key components of compliance framework. I'm sure if you even go to the what do I say, your module, you will not find a detailed explanation of what all these components are. But briefly, I'm going to talk about these things. So, what is compliance chart? We'll have a deeper understanding in the next segment of our chapter. What is this chart? How is it prepared? And different other things about this. But compliance chart, if I have to give you, it is that chart which gives the complete details. What are the laws, rules, and applicable, and classification of the risk based on that particular compliances and all the different things, right? It just talks about the entire compliance angle of the overview of the compliances of the company. So that's the compliance chart. Then is the compliance advisory. Normally, you might not find this particular topic, especially given briefly in the module or anywhere else. So what is this compliance advisory? The role of a framework is not only limited in preparing the chart, it's also, the onus or the responsibility is on us as a company secretary to advise the company on if they're going certain, if they're going about and kind of deviating from the compliance requirements. I'll give you an example. You must have heard about legal opinion, right? So what is this legal opinion? Legal opinion, normally we take it from an external people, no? But there are times when you as a company secretary inside the company also are required to give an opinion on various aspects. I'll just give you an example. If your company is into maybe like, in the finance sector, right? And then they're going about and want to, do some sort of a product. So they will come to you and ask, hey, as per the regulatory requirements, is it okay for me to actually go ahead and do this particular activity? Does that, regulations will not stop me? So in that time, you also need to act as an advisory person, right? You also need to have an advisory function to play because they're coming to you with a question. They're coming to you to understand how important for them is it to, have an understanding. So that's about it. Next, that's the compliance advisory. Then there's the compliance scorecard. What does this compliance scorecard mean? It's about something very related to the chart, was because in the chart, what we do is we put out the compliance requirements. We classify this risk into different risk levels, which is critical risk, high risk, medium risk, and low risk areas. And based on that, we give them a scorecard depending on how they are being complied in the company. I'll give you an example. Next, in the next particular class also, I'll show you the compliance chart of the company as well. Like how do we classify the risk levels and all of that, right? because it's easier for you to actually, when you see that in person, it's easier for you to understand things. So scorecard, how do we give the scorecard is that we tell in high risk areas, we tell, hey, within some timeline, within, like I'll just give you an example, annual return has to be filed within some timeline, or maybe some DPT3 has to be filed within some time. Okay. So that timeline we would have mentioned, and scorecard is based is something which is based out that how good is the compliance done. And based on the scorecard, it's like, okay, if I'm giving one, it just like scorecard can be given in any different ways. If you're giving five, five means to say that you're very good, you've complied according to the standards and everything. Like you overperform, that's the way. But if there is a timeline, or if you've taken a little more time or asked for the extension, even as per whatever law is requiring you to, you're going for 3 or 2, right? It's like it's ideally reducing your score. So this is how a scorecard is defined in the framework. So a framework is something which not only is limited to the chart alone, it's something along with the chart you or a framework expects or like even acts as an advisory function in case if there's a new question or the new risk which is coming up in the organization or the operations. Then related to the chart is something that we score the risk and we score the kind of obligation based on how well they have performed in the previous segment. So that's all about compliance, corporate compliance framework. So these 3 components we understood, right? Next, let's go and understand the compliance chart, which is the first important segment or a component in the compliance framework. So what do we understand? Hey, like I want to ask you a question. Sorry. My bad. I want to ask you a question before that. Has it been any time, has someone seen compliance chart? Guys, have you seen compliance chart? Any one of you? Oh, sorry. And this is going. Okay, chats. Yeah. No. Okay. No. Fine. Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah. I'll show you tomorrow. Sorry that I don't have that file with me today. But then I'll show you tomorrow. A compliance chart is like a really beautifully written out chart. It like I'm just telling you, it just makes your life easier. But if you're given a point where you have to you have to prepare the chart, it's going to be a little riskier and a kind of like a more responsibility sort of a work. But there's nevertheless, right? It's always an advantage for you to do things for the first time is because you have a better control on things. So that's about it. And I guess now that you don't have, it's beautiful for me to actually go ahead and explain this thing because it's all new and raw for you. You understand first what is the meaning of compliance chart, how do we prepare and how to go about and everything. So in the next class, I'll show you so that you'll have more practical knowledge and experience about it. So that's about it. Just 1 second. Okay. I'm just resuming the share. Okay. So here we are in front of compliance chart. So what is the meaning of this compliance chart, guys? It's a chart which is very important or a vital part of compliance framework. Yes, we've already understood this, right? I've been stressing on again that in a compliance framework, compliance chart plays a very important role. And what does it include is that it provides the details and the overview of the applicable rules, laws, regulations, standards, and even for that matter, policies, like required policies for the business enterprise. So what do we understand by this? Is that a chart is something which not only restricts itself in just mentioning few laws and regulations, but it also mentions that it completely gives an overview. It's like an exhaustive list, right? Tomorrow, if I'm showing the chart, no, you will have a better understanding. It is so huge. It's like, the because of the complexity. I'm not saying that, of course, it can be even simpler in certain organizations, but normally in most of the properly working organization, compliance chart is like really, really, really big. So, like the ideally it will cover from everything, like it will cover like each and everything which needs to be mentioned, right? So it talks about all those laws, rules, regulations, standards, policy requirements, which is applicable for a business and enterprise. I work in an NBFC sector. If I have to tell you, for us, I'll give you an example how it is, how do we prepare the compliance chart. The first thing that I have to be understanding is company law is aside. I will definitely take company law because that's a core thing of mine. But along with that, being in an NBFC sector, the first thing I have to understand is who is my regulatory body? My regulatory body is RBI. And what is the RBI guidelines which is applicable to me? What is the requirements which is applicable to me? All of that is something that I need to be putting in this chart. That's the reason, again, I said it's an exhaustive chart. It's not a simple and easy thing. It is an exhaustive chart. Of course, once you prepare this, it's very easy to track things, but it's definitely is an exhaustive list of things, right? So that's about what does it include, and it reflects two things. Why I mentioned this in the Patriotic view is that I wanted you to understand that this is what we nearly, if you're going and even going and understanding the compliance chart of any organization, this is something that you're actually going and see. The first important thing a chart will have to give you is the key activity which needs to be undertaken, or the key activities which needs to be followed by that person, especially a compliance chart. What it should include is it should give out what is the key activities to be undertaken by a business. Okay, so like what is something that need to be taken if you're in a finance sector, if you're in an NBFC sector, or even if you're in a probably like an insurance sector, what is something like a key things that you need to be taking as a company? That's one. And it also gives, as we have already discussed, the compliance calendar. It just is not only limited with just putting out the rules, laws, and regulation. It tells you that hey, every month you need to comply to these, every quarter you need to comply to this, every half yearly you need to comply to this, and a yearly basis. So variously based on different things, it will give out the entire checklist or the timelines like a calendar. It says that hey, today you're eligible, or not even eligible. Today you're required to comply to these things. So what we do, especially in the company scenario, is that we kind of keep reminders. Okay, we kind of like keep the pop-up reminders saying that 15 days before the compliance, you give us a pop-up. We kind of like note that down in the calendars like that and try incorporating to it. I guess you can also do that if you want to try it. It's like put a calendar today, from today 15 days now. I'm like, okay, we are going to be finishing, Imra is going to be finishing around what, like 2-3 chapters within another 3 weeks. I'm just giving an example. You can say that and give a reminder, and a week before you can have a pop-up notification coming to you saying that hey, this was a reminder to Impana completing so many chapters. Is it okay? Has she completed? It's something that you can understand for yourself. So same way, we do it with a compliance chart also. Okay. So what did we understand here? This chart is an important segment of a framework, and it gives a complete overview of all those laws, rules, and everything which is applicable for that company or a business. And then it talks mainly about two things, which is it gives us the compliance calendar, and also it mentions what are those key functions and activities which need to be undertaken by the organization. So that's about compliance chart. Any questions, guys? Tell me if you have any questions. Any questions? You can put out in the chat section. Has it been okay for you to? Oh, so sorry. Give me 1 second. Yeah. Any questions? No, it's clear. Okay, no questions. Fine. Okay, good. Yeah. And tell me if you want more examples, I can give you more, because it's like a huge, it's a wide area of expertise. It's like you can go and deep dive and understand everything. It's really nice. So cool. Then I'll just share my screen. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so that's about compliance chart. Next, how to go about and prepare this chart is something which is mentioned here. So before preparation, you normally go and ask about what is the basis for you to prepare, right? That's very important segment, So for that, let's understand, if I'm preparing today a compliance chart, what is a basis for me to go and understand and require for me as a person to, keep in mind few things before doing a compliance chart. The first thing is that what is the operations of a business, right? I again and again I'm stressing on you need to understand the business model of the company or the entire details of the company to prepare this chart because this chart is something like a guiding principle once it is prepared. And we need to be really, really careful and understand deep dive and understand the depth of operations, business models, and everything before creating this chart. So you need to understand the operations, like is it a manufacturing activity? Is it a service industry? Is it an industry of logistics? So different operations you need to understand. Then the structure, right? You have seen some companies have only one office where there's only one place, and you're just going about and understanding the entire thing and all of that. But there are also times when you just like going and understanding only certain segments. Okay, so it's like I'm just giving you an example. It's like branches. Okay. So if only one company is established in one place, it's going to be only that laws applicable to that company. But if that company has a branch or a different, units in the different places, then we need to also make sure how is the company structured, what are the subsidiaries of the company, how is it related, and what are the beneficial ownership. Like beneficial ownership meaning to say that who is indirectly connected to the company by the way of holdings, by the way of control and ownership. Based on all these things, we need to understand the structure, operation, and an industry. Of course, as I told, is it a finance industry? Is it an NBFC sector? Or is it a sector of insurance? Or is it even a sector of non-profit, organizations? Various other things, right? Then is the type. This is really important, guys. Like I need to know is it a private limited company or is it a company which is, how do I say, is it like a listed company? Is it a public company? And if it's being a listed company, what are the rules and laws and regulations applicable? Because that's how you devise, right? So in order to know and devise the rules and laws applicable, you definitely need to know the type of company. Then is the sector which is operating. Because I'll give you an example here in this again. Certain sectors are only eligible for funding to certain percentage, especially funding from a foreign institution to only certain percent. There's a capping, right? I'm sure you must have already seen that capping in economic and commercial law and executive paper, I believe. So all that capping is something that we need to understand even before I go ahead and do. Because if a company is coming to me and actually telling me, hey, like I want to go and take an investment in the company, you need to make sure that whatever the investment that you're going to be taking up is compliant to that company. So for that, you need to understand which sector does it belong to and what are the different laws and rules applicable and what are the restrictions applicable to each sector-wise companies, right? So that's all about it. The very basis for a preparation of a compliance chart is that you need to know what is the company doing, how is it structured, and which industry does it belong, and what is the type of a company, which is very important, and the kind of sector it is performing under. Because all that is very important for you to have a basis to prepare the compliance chart. So that's about compliance chart. Next, we're talking about the contents. So we just said so many different things, right? By now, you must have heard me talking like it should contain this, it should contain that, it contains so many different things. But what actually it contains is that I'm in this particular segment I'm talking about. So what is the content of a compliance chart? It says it gives out an exhaustive list of laws, rules, and regulations. Sorry that I didn't have much space. Standards and procedures, policies which is applicable for a company. So all these things should be mentioned in the compliance calendar or the compliance chart. So that's one. Next is the internal and external compliance obligation and associated risk. See, I'll give you an example here. So what do you understand by external compliance obligation? It's very simple for you. It's like what does an MCA require us to do? What does a RBI require us to do? Or what does a Companies Act perspective require us to file what forms and what needs to be done by different organizations as per the different industry standards is something like an external compliance obligation. But what is an internal compliance obligation is something within the company only, there's a hierarchy of compliance. Okay. Because you guys have not worked, I'm giving you an example of this. See, if I am preparing today something that is very useful and also which is which is very important in terms of the operations of a company, that goes to the compliance department because that needs to be checked, right? So that is very important, especially of course the compliance department mostly in the organization is going to be secretarial team along with other few compliance people. But this is an internal obligation because internally and also the internal auditor requirement is also one of the internal obligations. So all that internal compliance obligations is something which is like, reporting to few people, giving out the details of you to few people, they checking and internal auditors checking. All that is a requirement inside the company along with the external requirements mandated by the law and the associated risk. See, again and again I'm stressing on compliance is becoming very important and vital is because the risk associated with it is very, is increasing in nature. And because of all that, internal and external compliance obligations has to be understood. Along with that, it should be understood that what are the risks associated with it is something which needs to be captured in this chapter. That's all. Next, the first and second point we have already done. The third point is the risk classification. So now that we have understood what is the risk requirement, we will have to classify this. Even in the first part of the video, again I mentioned, we classify the risk based on four different levels. Of course, there is also another aspect where you even classify the risk in another segments as well. But mostly it's a four compliance, sorry, not compliance, this risk classification which we do is the critical risk, high risk, medium risk, and low risk. So all this way a risk is classified, and based on the importance and based on the effect of non-compliance, the risk is classified and it is being classified under this chart. Next is the mapping of the risk to the responsible people. It's the ownership, right? Why am I telling again is I'll give you an example here. If a company secretary, so if like, okay, a company is required to follow certain secretarial records. That's right, no? So, and maintain certain secretarial records or maintain certain minutes and, board meeting compliances and all of that. So all these compliances form a part of compliance chart, and they will, of course, they will be classified based on the risk. And once the risk classification is done, the mapping of all this risk or the kind of compliance requirements to the responsible people is done. Like how the maintaining of minute book, maintaining of registers, or conducting the board meeting within the timelines and what are noting down on the various important segments and parts of in the meetings. It's all these responsibilities of the compliances are to be routed to whom? Routed to the company secretary department, if there is a department, or otherwise it's just to the company secretary who should be responsible. So this is one way of example. Again, like even in case of finance head will be the main sole responsible person, but under him there will be a bifurcation and everything based on the compliance requirement. So on these different ways, once the compliances are sorted out, all these compliances are put through to different people based on the kind of expertise that they follow. Next, tracking, tracing, and reporting. This is very important. The reason why the chart is prepared is because once we understand what are the requirements, what is the risk associated with it, we need to monitor this on a regular basis and kind of do a reporting sort of a thing, that how we are doing in terms of an organization, how well we are doing in terms of an organization, that are we following to the compliance requirements? Is there any gap between what needs to be followed, what need not have to be followed? Then how to go about and mitigate or reduce this risk is something which is this tracking, tracing, and reporting thing, right? So compliance chart should have to include the list of compliances, the risk associated with it, classification of the risk, and who is the person who's responsible. Then the last one is the tracking, tracing, and reporting, which is the monitoring thing. All this should, all of them are to form a part of compliance chart. So these are the contents of compliance chart. So we understood what we need to consider before doing a compliance chart and what is something that we need to include in a compliance chart. And next, the important segment is the role of company secretary in preparing this compliance chart. So this is, I'm sure, especially when I saw this in the module, there's a very exhaustive list they've given this is very important. The reason why they're given in the most exhaustive way is because the kind of importance it puts forth in our, in especially in our scenario, and why is it required and what is the role. I've been telling, of course, and this is not going to be new for you. because I've been telling how important as a company secretary we play an important role in the compliance chart, compliance framework, and all of that. But this is like a like a detailed classification which is done out. So let's understand it. The first is the identification of applicable law, rules, regulations. Next, risk assessment, compliance risk mitigation, compliance monitoring, and reporting. So many different things are there. I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen and want you guys to speak and tell me what did you understand or how have you understood so far. Is there any doubts that you have? Guys, put out in the chat section or unmute yourself. Compliance calendar is similar like Google Calendar. Well, you can say that. Yes, probably. Yes, but a more exhaustive. Yeah. And so I want you guys to tell me, like, how did you feel? What is the difference? How are you feeling about the class? I really want you. Are you able to understand? And is there any questions so far? Before we dive in and actually understand the role requirements of us as company secretaries and the importance of company secretary, especially in a compliance framework scenario. In case of compliance reporting, to whom we will be reporting? Okay. Internally, it works like this. I'll tell you. Compliance, though, okay, in the scenario, it's the functional heads going to compliance department, then internal auditor. Yeah, this is the hierarchy it goes. So it's the functional heads, so which is to say that finance head and secretarial head, or even for that matter, capital markets head, or operations head, HR head, all these people do certain compliances. Their team report to them. They make a consolidated report. They give all this report to the compliance department of the company. They every time, like on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, there will be a check from a compliance department. And once the compliance department do have a check, then it goes to the internal auditor who will be doing on a quarterly basis all these checks before all the information goes to the external auditor. So this is exactly the flow how the compliance reporting goes in the company. Okay. Any other questions? Guys, put me out any question. It's okay. I know that I've been told that I talk much, but let's use that for a better purpose. And I really want you to guys come up with all the questions. If the compliance chart goes wrong, compliance report will become a bit complex process. On a situation of non-compliance, who will be liable? A company or a CS? Let me tell you. Sole responsibility lies with the management. The management responsibility lies with the management because CS acts as a facilitator for preparation. Okay. CS again acts only as a facilitator to prepare this chart, and she or he will guide towards how a company compliances should run. And not that I'm telling it's the sole responsibility of you guys to prepare this chart, because when you're preparing this chart, right, you go and actually sit with all the different functional heads in the company, even with an external, party being for an external legal counsel also sometimes. And once this entire chart is prepared, no, mostly it lies as a responsibility in a bigger organization. The compliance team takes care of it. But in a smaller organization, let's take it forward that we as a company secretary take this responsibility on us just to make sure that we're tracking things. Okay. But the responsibility to do and to follow the report and the chart is solely on management. And if they fail so, and even if your question is that if it goes wrong, then it's always a time. That is why the internal auditor and regular checking is there. If somewhere we're going here and there, some deviations are there, we're always there and they are always there to identify that and tell us, then kind of modification or edit can be done in that chart. So that's the importance of a compliance chart. And it's not only sole responsible on a CS. Again, I'm stressing on we are just acting again here as a facilitator, not a sole responsible person. Any more questions? What are the points to be kept in mind by the internal auditor and compliance management? It's really broad, yeah, Padma. Actually, the why I've been telling you, right? They have to keep everything in their mind. But one thing that they need to keep, a few things that they need to check is the deadlines, because they need to understand the reporting time. That is very important for them to do that. That is one. And okay, they concentrate on high risk high risk areas, especially because for them it's very important to know and be compliant to the high risk areas. Even here and there, if a low risk area goes ad hoc, that's still okay for them, because that is okay. Like we can go and change that and all of that. But it's very required for them to actually identify how important is the high risk areas performing. That's one. Deadlines, high risk areas, what else would they want to check? I'm just trying to imagine. Like I'm just trying to recall. Um, I guess how well the departments are complying, right? So the kind of reporting structure within the within each department's reporting structure within each department is structure is also identified by them, because especially I'll give you an example. In one of the scenario I myself saw that in that particular department, the structure of reporting was so ad hoc that people didn't even know what they were doing. Like it was that bad. Like they were just going and just doing random stuff. Reporting used to anyway go to the functional head, but because of all this random stuff, the end result was something which was very ad hoc. So internal auditors found out that. They went ahead, spoke to the team members, said that, hey, you have to create a proper reporting structure, like maker and checker. So have you heard of concept of maker and checker? Guys, put out in the chat section. I just want to know. Otherwise, I'll tell you like what is maker and checker concept. Or if you've already known, then I'll ask someone of you to tell. It's okay. Let's also understand from you guys. Let me not just do all the talking. I'm not getting any this thing. Never heard of it. Okay. So maker and checker concept in especially in an organization is very important. That in a reporting structure means to say that in a department there will be a requirement for someone to do an activity, which means he should be the maker of the document or maker of any activity, and checker will be the person who will check this thing, right? And in order to create a right reporting structure within the organization or within the department, internal auditor, or for that matter, anyone to do a right compliance requirement, they need to have a maker and checker basis. Is because I'll give you an example. You are only preparing a document, you are only checking it, you are only sending. Then who is the person who's going to identify your fault? Who is the person who's going to tell you that, hey, this could have been done better, or this could have like ideally been checked by some person? All that is never done, right? That is the reason maker and checker concept exists, is because for someone to make a document, for someone to check a document, just to ensure that, I guess in the bank especially, I'll give you an example. There's something known as bank signature verification thing, which is BSV, which will be mentioned in various forms of bank. Okay, what they want is whenever you're going and opening any particular account or anything, no? So they kind of like check your signatures, and this is exactly the way they do it. Like a person, some other person will be doing certain things, activities in an organization, but it will be checked by some other person just to ensure that the activity done by that person is going fine. So this is the concept of maker and checker. Hope you're clear with it. If I've been able to answer it properly. And this is very important. The reason why I've took out this topic is that this is very important, because when you go to the organization or you start working, no, you will hear this word maker and checker. Okay, so that is really required. So that's about it. I guess we're good to go.
Hello,
Yeah, tell me, Padma.
I have a question, ma'am.
Mhm.
What is the difference between strategic management and compliance management? Is there any difference?
Okay, so yes, there's a slight difference if I have to talk about.
Mm.
Compliance management mostly talks on how do we manage the compliances, Whereas in case
Mm-hmm.
of a strategic management, it's more like a structural. How do I put that out? It's a way how you plan things. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
strategic is
Okay.
more like how you plan out various things. Compliance only talks about compliance, but strategic management is on a bigger level in an organization. How are you strategizing each business, each operations, each things? From even a compliance also will include in it, but strategic management is a bigger perspective. Okay,
Okay.
so it's like strategizing everything, but compliance management is only managing the compliances. So
Mm.
that's the difference.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Cool guys. I guess we're good. All of that is the question A section is like really amazing. I love this session, guys. Even anytime, any given point of time, if you have any questions, please shoot out. Here in the Telegram group, I'm more happy to answer. Okay. I guess sometimes here and there you can expect certain delays, but mostly I'll be able to answer that. So that's about it, and we will go and start sharing our screen again and understand more on. Okay, hey, before that, yeah, I just want to know. So, how many of you tell me that am I going too slow or am I going too fast? Or how many of you guys want me to finish the syllabus within what time? You have to mention that. Tell us, put out in the chat section. I want to know. What is your deadline? I want to know from you guys. What's your deadline that you have kept in mind? That how long you want this particular syllabus of this paper to get over so that you can study well. And if you're going slow, please tell me. I can speed that up. Or if you're going a little fast, I can slow that also down. But just trying to like make sure that everyone, I'm just like going a little slow before November mid, okay, and interesting. October end, got it, fine. Any other thoughts on November mid, October end? Okay, yeah, like I guess that's something like an easy thing only. I guess we're not gonna be like we're gonna be finishing things. So my aim is clearly another like a week time. I'm gonna give you like an entire picture of how these classes will go. Just to like I'm just trying to understand how and everything and how what is the speed and everything that we can go about. But my concern is mostly I'm planning to finish this with another sometime that at least by you have at least an 1 month minimum of time for you to study this the syllabus, right? So and also again I'm stressing on I'm going to be giving like this is that I used to follow and I want you guys to follow is that once the entire chapter is over, start putting that chapter in a page of one or two. Okay, this will help you guys, especially when you're revising and you don't have any time left to revise a day before the exam. This will help you just to recall through all the 20-25 chapters which is there, and you can be like you're like experts, put all the things, all important things in one or two chapters, say one or two pages, and just revise, keep revising, right? The best thing for you to do is that to revise again. Okay, so that's again like it's the assignment. It's not like I'll finish by November mid and I'm going to leave you guys and just make sure that okay you guys do whatever you want. I'll make sure every week we have this 1 or 2 pages sort of an assignment done by you guys, and I'll keep seeing how you guys are doing. And if there's anything, and sorry, yeah, like I forgot to tell you, I was about to get the scanner. I've ordered the scanner. I'll get it very soon. Okay. But even if not, also, if I've missed any, if you have any questions pertaining to any previous year question papers, tell me. If I've missed something, I'll try answering that. Okay. So that's about it. But let's have a regular assessment, regular check, so that by the time even if we finish the syllabus, I want you guys to already be aware of everything in the syllabus, and minimum of 60% you would have read by the syllabus, and you have all the time just to study and be sharp. Okay, what evaluators expect from us? Do we need to present the answer precisely, or can we write with our own words? Precisely, I didn't understand the word precisely. What do you mean to say, Mahesh Babu? If you can unmute yourself and tell me, I can understand that in a better way.
Ma'am, actually, do we need to present the answers exactly?
Uh,
The words, what is there in the study
no, yeah,
material,
nothing like that.
terminology.
Come on. This is really not a hard and fast rule. All of us are professionals. if you pass this exam, you're going to be professionals yourself. It's not going to be like, they'll expect that sort of a thing. But what I suggest is please use the words which is very, interesting for you to adopt, right? It's like example being that any sort of a legal nonsense, okay? If some word is like capturing you or saying something like, which makes the, kind of answers of yours more comfortable and more attractive to the evaluator, it's the best thing. Nothing like it. It's like a cherry on the top. Even if you've given all the answers perfectly, if you've mentioned one or two lines or even words like that, it's like it's the best thing. That person will just think that, it's all, I'm just again stressing on, it's a trick to make sure that the evaluator understands you properly, and it's a trick to make sure that the evaluator thinks that you've gone through the syllabus and you've understood the topic very well. So please follow that trick. That's very important. Okay. So if my question, if I have to answer your question precisely, it is to say that you don't have to follow everything what is mentioned in the syllabus, or sorry, what is mentioned in the module. You don't have to go by the words, but always make sure you pick one or two, kind of like a word from that topic, which will make you stand out from the other students, because that will fetch you more marks. Okay, you good? I guess we should be. And I guess, yeah, let me go and, you know, share my screen and just complete this. Okay. Okay, guys. So we understood about compliance chart, which is the basis for the preparation, the contents, what needs to be included in the compliance chart. The next thing that we're going to be talking about is the role of a company secretary, right? So this is very important, being that I've been always telling you, we have an onus, we have a responsibility on us just to make sure that a chart is very well prepared and we are very well compliant to certain things. Okay. The first important things is the identification of applicable law, rules, and regulations. I guess that we have discussed this exhaustively in the previous segments also of us, right? Even in the contents, what needs to be included. So as a company secretary, along with not only the company secretary role alone, but we as a company secretary, along with other functional heads in the organization, should go about and identify all those laws, rules, regulations which is applicable on our organization. So especially if I have already given you the example, if it's an industry of finance, what is the laws applicable? If it's an industry of insurance, what is the law applicable, or various other things. So that needs to be identified. So this is the role of a company secretary. The first thing for him or her to understand is that they need to identify the laws, rules, and regulations, even the guidelines. And certain times, especially in RBI, if you can see, go to the RBI website and just check if you've not seen. There's a lot of guidelines being put out in the RBI things. Okay. So, and guidelines, not like any other statute or an act, guidelines play an important role for an RBI regulated entity. Okay. So that's about identification of laws. Next, second thing is the risk assessment. Why am I talking about risk assessment? Is because a compliance chart is not very limited to only mentioning the laws, as I've already told. It is for the role of a company secretary is to assess the risk. So how do we go about and assess the risk? Is there two different ways that we can assess this risk, right? Let me just give you. I guess I saw it in your book. There are different ways that we actually assess the risk, but two important, majoritively, the risk assessment procedures or a kind of ways it can be put out in your module is high risk level assessment and detailed risk assessment. Okay. I've already told the risks are classified in the compliance chart. No, so based on once the risk is classified into critical high risk areas and medium and low risk, there are two important, about two important risks we give more importance of. The first one is the critical and high risk areas is because of its complexities and because it has a larger impact on the risk. So it is very important for us, especially as a student, or so not just students or a company secretary. It is very important for us to identify what is the risk associated with that kind of a risk level. If in case we do not follow, what is the different obligations which will be put on us. And the next thing, what we need to understand, why are we going to give importance to the high risk level is, if you're not going to follow, what are the penalties and the punitive actions? All this can be avoided, right? So just to make sure that all these things are done in a better way, high risk areas are identified. So what it talks about is, it reads as follows. Okay. I'm just going to read that out to you. So, high risk level assessment, the risk identification procedure and its assessment and a detailed risk assessment results are required as an inputs for the high level risk assessment, which are facilitated by representative of risk management team. The current and anticipated critical and high compliance risk must be included in the high level risk assessment process. Okay. So what do we understand? It's a very pretty complicated wordings of line. I normally don't like, especially when people put out too many things in a word of 2 or 3 lines, right? This is really too much. I felt the reason why I read that out to you is to make sure that please never write your answers in a way which is being put out here. Because if you're actually going and writing answers to a person who's evaluating your paper, just to make sure that a person does not have time, again, and I'm stressing on you guys, the person who does not have enough time for him to take that kind of interest in your paper just to make sure that, hey, this person has written so many things, let me go and understand and read that thing. That is not the thing. Okay, they're going to be very very quick. If you're impressing the evaluator within 1 or 2 lines of yours, he will be impressed. So the role of a company secretary, one something, again, if we have to come back to the topic, is that whenever you're putting out even as an answer in your papers, and also as a company secretary in the company, risk assessment plays a very important role. And high risk level, if I have to put it in a very easier way for you guys, high risk level assessment is the assessment of that risk, which is of a high risk value or a critical risk value. It might be the current risk also, or the anticipated, like whatever the upcoming risk in the future. So based on all of that, especially these risks are identified, these risks are monitored, and this particular risk are assessed in such a way that we will not go about and non-comply to any of the things. So that's about high level risk assessment. Okay. Next is the risk assessment, which is the detailed risk assessment. The reason why am I talking about the detailed risk assessment is something that they're very stressing on is, okay, once we have understood the high risk level, we are given importance. But there are certain risks which are associated with a certain compliances that will require more understanding and a deeper understanding and more time to be spent on. So in these times, what we understand is, especially, I'll give you an example. This was very recent, which happened to me. There was this regulation which came in Atmanirbhar scheme, which talked about that a private limited company issuing a listed NCD will not be treated as a listed company. Okay. So if you see the definition of a listed company, any company which issues a listed instrument, being the equity shares, debentures, or any other instrument, will be treated as a listed company, is something which was mentioned in the definition. So according to that definition, all those companies which were getting their securities listed were treated to be listed compliances, listed companies, and the compliances requirements of the listed company were applicable to them, except for here and there, or 1 or 2 was the exemption. Okay. But what happened? We went ahead, we took a chance and said that, not even took a chance, we went ahead with this Atmanirbhar package, which talked about that a private limited company will not be regarded as a listed company if it issues the listed instrument. The reason why they came up with this particular regulation or a kind of relief for us was that because it was so tedious for anyone as a private limited company to establish or comply to the listing regulations. That is one. And second thing is, in a market, you also have understood, especially in the debt market, right? It is difficult for us to raise the money from the market because all of us are going through a hell lot of things, and even the economy is not really working well. So just to make sure that the private companies are not burdened with the compliances, this particular package gave certain relaxation. But what happened again is that, see, we knew that the package had given relaxation, but the real point was that we went ahead, told this to one of the few people. But what happened on the other hand is that we couldn't reach out, right? They were not convinced with our idea. And then they were also very confused. We also didn't had enough resources with us because the package didn't really talk about any sort of an implemental regulations in another places and all of that. So we went to an external person, which is a legal counsel, and we asked about, hey, what do you think about this? Okay. And they came up with a detailed, information about it. So that is why I'm telling again and again, stressing on to you. So this is a detailed risk assessment, which means any assessment of a risk which requires an in-depth or a little more of an understanding into the subject matter. And also it talks about where external support is required is where the detailed risk assessment comes into picture. So that's the two ways how we can assess the risk. So that's about risk assessment. The first is the identification of loss, second is the risk assessment, third being the compliance risk mitigation. Okay. So how do we go? See, now that we have understood the various risks, what is the impact, how important it is for us to follow through, risk mitigation plays an important role again, right? So risk mitigation is something that how to go about and mitigate the risk and what activities need to be taken by a person to mitigate the risk is something that we're going to be talking about. The first and foremost thing is that if as a company secretary, the role of us is that first to tell everyone that, hey, these are the risks, these are the non-compliance areas, and how to go about and changing that risk is something which will be the risk mitigation area. I'll give you an example here. I, as a company secretary, am going and telling one of the department is not functioning very well. Okay. I have to go in one of my mitigation measures. I have to go tell them and give them the awareness of how important is the risk and what if we don't comply, and also tell that how to go about and change their activities is something which will be the risk mitigation procedure. So this is compliance risk mitigation. Then the next fourth point is compliance monitoring. So as I've already told, compliance does not restrict itself only to the mitigation measures, only to putting out the compliance requirements. It also talks about the monitoring can only be done based on how a compliance are done by the company, how well is it going, what is the gap between all of that, and if there is any other ways that we can incorporate and adopt to the better changes or better compliances is something which will be mentioned in compliance monitoring stage. Okay. So by now, it's a kind of story. Just remember it as a story that first, as a company secretary, I go identify what are the rules and laws applicable. Then, based on rules and laws, once I know the compliance requirement, I'll have to go and understand the risk associated with it, and which means to say that I'll have to assess the risk. And the next thing that I have to be making sure is that all those risks which I have identified, and if someone is not complying, how I'm going and helping them in mitigating that risk, and so that the compliances are fulfilled in a better manner. Then this can only be done by me by the way by the way of monitoring all this compliance requirements like tracking, tracing, and all of that. So that's another one. And then the last one is the compliance reporting. So as I've already told in the previous sections of this particular video or the class as well, that this compliance reporting forms, like I told, once the work is done, it goes to the functional heads. Then functional heads gives a consolidated report on each of their departments to the compliance department see through it, then goes to the internal auditor. So these kind of checks is something which is all mentioned, and why a role of a company secretary plays an important role is that, so once the company secretary is monitoring all this activity, he also has to report these compliances to the MD or to the board of directors. So at a level where normally when all the consolidated reports from the compliance department comes, the final stage it comes is to the company secretary, and the company secretary looks into it. If there's any deviances, she or he will identify it, and then she or he will brief to the board of, especially the MD, managing director, and managing director looks in and charts down what are the different ways we need to be bettering ourselves, right? And he puts out the kind of a plan action for bettering ourselves, and then he entirely puts all this report to whom? To the report to the board of directors. So the chain runs like this: a company secretary identify the rules and regulations, then identify the risk and mitigate this risk or reduce this risk, and then how she reduces or he will reduce this to by the way of continuous monitoring and tracking. And then finally the company secretary, with all the help of different functional heads, give the consolidated report to the MD, and MD thus thereby gives the report to the board of directors or the entire senior management people. So this is exactly the way how it runs, and if you remember this as a story, it will be very useful and easy. Like always remember it as a hierarchical wise, and also a role of a company secretary can just be learned, and this is the entire way. Okay. So that's about company secretary's role. Hey, you have any questions? Tell me if you have any questions. Chats, okay. Please explain compliance risk mitigation one more time. Okay, cool, yeah, will do. Okay. 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 So it's getting shared. Okay. I'll tell you how. So if I have to give you an example, a risk mitigation is something I, as a company secretary, how I'll play a role. So the first, once I've identified the rules and laws and different other things which is applicable on a company, and how I've evaluated once the evaluation of the risk is done. So the next measure for me is to identify, go there, and mitigate this risk. Mitigate meaning to say that reduce the risk of the compliance. How to go about and understand is very important for me here. See, if again, I'll give you an example. As a company secretary, maybe let's take an example. It's easier because you also know the HR department. You know, at least have got the idea how HR department works and everything. If I'm going to a HR department as a company secretary and I have a compliance chart prepared, I had some sort of a thing like, example, some labor laws are applicable to me, like PF reduction. Okay. So PF reduction has to be done within some days, or for that matter, certain things has to be followed by, in the wise of how, PF has to be deducted. That's one. And if you've heard, that crutch facility has to be given to the companies who has around 10 or more employees, I believe. So all that is something which is required by a HR department because HR department looks into all these things. Okay. So if given a point of time, maybe in your company, what happens? I have a chat. Company expands or when companies diversify, will there be any change in the structure? Yeah, it definitely will be. Okay, good, fine. I'll look into the example now. So if the crutch facility is not given, Padma, okay, and what I have to do, I have to go to the HR department, tell them why. I have to ask them why is the crutch facility not being provided still? Why have they not adopted it? Then they will come up and give me certain reasons. Okay, then I'll have to say them that, hey, okay, maybe they'll tell we don't have a room, enough room or a space in our office, ma'am, or we don't have a place where, because certain crash facility cannot be just established like that. Okay, so it has to have certain sort of an environmental issues. So like environmental requirements. Okay, so based on that, the person will come and tell me. So what I suggest them is, I suggest them then how about you go, because there's also in the law there's also a requirement. If you don't have an in-house crash facility, you can give this crash facility within some diameters or some radius of the company, that you can give that particular to the, like that facility to the employees. Okay, so I suggest her saying that, hey, why don't you go about, because I also wouldn't have gone, but I go to the law and say that, hey, I have read this in the law. Why don't you go about and search for a crutch facility or like a preschool sort of a facility which is nearby, okay, which will take care of our needs. Then she goes about and does an research and come back to me and say that, hey, within some kilometers I've found it, and is it compliant to the law? Then I will say, yeah, it is compliant, because if everything is compliant to it, then this is where we reduce the risk. Low, they reduce the risk of us of non-complying to the crutch facility. So this is the mitigation activity. This is exactly the way in a normal, in a scenario in a business, how a mitigation activity actually happens. It's like going, understanding why the department is not complying, giving them a different ways for them to comply it in a better manner, and then putting everything in such a way so that they will comply, and we will reduce the risk of non-compliance. Is exactly the way this is how it's right. So what we understood in this example is, we saw the crutch facility, we wanted a crutch facility in the company, but we couldn't find one because we didn't have that space. Then we looked into an outside, we found one, we established, we gave that facility, and we mitigated that risk. We mitigated the risk of non-compliance of that particular compliance requirement as per the labor law. Am I clear? Was it clear for you? Okay, understood. Fine, got it. So I have one question from Manik, which talks about, when a company expands or when companies diversifies, will there be any change in the structure or is the compliance chart? Definitely, there will be a change. Recently, in my own scenario, our company acquired one subsidiary, and we had to entirely change our compliance chart because a lot of rules and regulations, especially of the related parties, the kind of loans that we can give to the subsidiary, or a different way how an ESOP scheme has to be drafted, everything got changed. And based on that, my compliance chart also changed. So yes, you definitely have to change. Just have to make sure that what is the rules and laws applicable for that compliance or that subsidiary of us, or even in case if there's any diversification that we merge into another company and all of that, or if we expand the business in terms of expanding into a different part of the India or different other places. Based on what is the requirements of that company or that place, we have to incorporate all that in the compliance chart. Yes, does it does happen. Okay. Are we clear till the role of company secretaries? Oh, good. Fine. What time is it? Yeah. 1:30. That's exactly 1:30. Okay. We're good. So what did we understand? We understood so far. What have we understood? We have understood compliance framework, the need and introduction thing. We've understood what is a compliance framework, why is a structure compliance is very important, and the chart, which is the important thing that we have understood. And then the compliance chart, which is to say that what is the basis for the preparation, contents, and the role of the company secretary in various different parts of compliance chart is something that we understood so far, right? Are you guys clear till here? Before we go about it, are you guys clear till here? What is my aim is, let me tell that out to you again. I want to complete this chapter tomorrow. We can, I guess, like only we have hardly another 2-3 topics. We'll complete this chapter tomorrow, and we're already done with the one chapter. And what we'll do is, I guess, it will hardly take me like around 30 minutes max, or maybe 40 minutes max for me to complete this chapter tomorrow. Okay, whatever the remaining topics are. So how about we do an assignment, guys, tomorrow? That do you guys have scanner or a previous year question papers with you? Do you have one? I saw few actually. So I was planning that we'll take a few questions from the previous year question papers pertaining to this chapter, and we'll answer that. If can we do that? Okay. Yes. I got the scanners. Okay, amazing. Then Shakti, can you just send that out in the Telegram group? Just like few questions. Can you do that? Because it's easier for us to like do that activity, because I'll also have a go through it. I'm sorry, I've ordered scanner. I don't know, some issue with the logistics. It's not coming. So first chapter alone, yes, Shakti. It's only first chapter I want. Just scan that and send it to me, or even a photo will do. That's okay. So just send it photos. Then we can have a better understanding sort of a session. If I can make one document also on that, I'll do that, and we can understand that in a better way. Okay. So tomorrow, around 30 to 40 minutes, I'll complete the chapter. And the next thing what we'll do is we'll take up the questions from the previous year question papers. We'll solve it. I'll tell you the ways, how better way, different ways that you can be answering all this, questions, right? That's one of the important things that we need to be understanding, because this is, I feel, as a students, we fail miserably when we are writing, writing answers. The reason being that the kind of expectation, especially guys, I'm again stressing on the kind of expectation level of everyone in and around, evaluators, is that they are expecting like a little top-notch answers from you. So, let's give them a little more than that only, and then impress them saying that, hey, like I'm really using like really good words and like really good things, just to make sure that they know that we have a deeper understanding in the subject. And again, I'm stressing on, please start using the examples. The reason why every time I give you more examples in the time when I'm explaining you things is that, see, you asked about the reporting thing. Okay, if you put that flow of a chart in one of the answers of yours, don't you think, I used to do that? Okay, and it had fetched me like really good marks. Okay, so what I used to do is that I used to put out sort of like a small, like whenever required, a small like a kind of a flow chart type of a thing, just to make sure that an evaluator who's evaluating my paper understands, and just, it's kind of like an impressing trick. Yeah, we can do that. I guess it's not that hard. So we can do this trick. It's good. It's amazing. So we'll do that.